Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. It is the morning after, it's not an instant reaction, but rather a morning after reaction from round 23. And joining me to break down what was a pretty wild game last night against the Penrith Panthers is my good mate, Sixties. Eels led for so long. It felt like, must have been like 95% of that game, Sixties, but gunned down at the end. And not without some controversy that we'll get to, as the Penrith Panthers came back over the top of them. Roller coaster of emotions. Obviously, we went in with a little bit of optimism, but knowing that Penrith were going to be damn hard to beat. And as they say, it's the hope that kills you. And the Eels certainly gave us plenty of hope until it got dashed. How'd you pull up after a shockingly painful 2-point loss to the Panthers? And it's really hard to frame that as a sentence that makes sense, because Penrith would have been monster favourites coming into this one.
John, I'll be straight up honest. This might be the first time this year that I just straight up didn't want to do an instant reaction, that I didn't want to talk about the game. I'm actually forcing myself to do this, such as the emotion that's lingering the morning after. Like, I am a combination of heartbroken, furious, proud. It's the weirdest sensation.
Don't you love sport? Like, don't you love sport? What other thing in life can evoke such a bizarre, contradictory state of being? You know, like you said, you're proud, but you're upset. You're angry, but you really love what the boys put on the table last night. Yes, it sucks to lose, but sports is just so batshit crazy in a cool way for stuff like this.
Mate, I think I said straight after the game, it felt eerily similar, although the effort was different, but it felt eerily similar to that 98 finals loss to the Bulldogs, simply because it was the same lead. It was run down so quickly and decisively, but I want to talk about how it was run down.
Like I said, not without controversy.
Oh, mate, absolutely. Now, and look, before we absolutely launch into what we want to say or have to say, because as I said, I'm just so gutted today, and I'm trying to get my head around now going out and covering the Jersey Flegg for TCT out at Cabramatta this afternoon. But first of all, a shout out to Parra for last night. Another full house there in the bistro. I had messages from people apologising that they couldn't come in to see us because there just wasn't any tables for them to come in and see us and say g'day. Massive thanks to Michael Butner. And John, you'll be tagging on his appearance to the end of this podcast. What was really interesting was listening to him talk about how he would attack the Panthers and the change of angles, and then watching the Eels actually do that out on the field to challenge the Penrith defensive line. I mean, it was literally what he spoke about was almost like a masterclass in this is what the team needs to do to stay with the Panthers to truly challenge them. And like us, he honestly believed that the Eels were capable of winning that game last night. So please stick to the end. Have a listen to what I think was a very insightful chat with Michael, because we talked about a lot of things around players, local juniors moving from their clubs. Mm-hmm. We talked about what it means to be in a team that's that's losing versus a team that's winning from a perspective of the mindset of the players. It was really a fascinating chat with Michael last night. We tried to make it a little bit different rather than necessarily just going back over Michael's career, because we've already chatted with Michael a few weeks ago. So I really enjoyed being able to dig into his football brain there. So look, as I said, thanks to Parra League's home of the Eels for making pre-game appearances possible for us there. Thanks also to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for their continued and loyal support of the Cumberland Throw. Also, whatever platform that you're listening to this podcast on, if you could give it a subscribe and a like, that is really fantastic for us. And we know there'll be a lot of people listening to this after last night, and we really are appreciative of that. But if you can do that, that would be great, especially those people that are listening to this via YouTube, because all the algorithms, with your like and subscribe, it gets it out there as suggestions for other people who are into the Eels and rugby league in general. So,
more chances
really appreciate that.
To infect more people to the cause, more people to suffer as Parramatta fans.
That's basically it. But mate, can we just start off with the stinger?
Oh yeah, I had this one ready because I knew we'd be leading off of it, and you 100% deserve to tee off. So let's go.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
John, we absolutely went to town in the news podcast about the obstruction rule. Last week was disgraceful, not just in the Eels game, but also in the game against the Tigers.
Yeah, Tigers, Cowboys.
Tigers.
Yep.
Yeah, it was, I don't know what the hell is going on. But I tell you what, it's almost like the blokes in the bunker have decided that the obstruction rule is now one where, I don't know if it feels like if you're a team that's not expected to be in the contest, that a critical obstruction call is almost like it's overlooked. It's almost like it didn't happen.
Yep.
And these are now the most blatant obstructions that are happening. We're not talking about ifs or maybes, which earlier in the year, the most partial of if would be pulled up for obstruction. The most almost non-existent obstructions somehow, like ones where it was going to have no impact on the play. And maybe people can argue that what happened last night to Dejan Arce with the Panthers winning try. Let's be very clear about this. The friggin' winning try.
Yeah, the Isaac Tungo 76-minute.
Oh, right. So with that, how is that suddenly okay?
And what makes it so interesting is that this was mechanically different to the ones we saw against Parramatta and West Tigers last week, where Liam Martin, he does run shaded to the inside shoulder of Dejan Arce, but then absolutely careens himself into the body of Arce and takes him out of the play. And running inside shoulder doesn't give you a free license to take out the defender. And Arce there was no defensive decision made there. That was all Martin just like bull rushing Arce. And it wasn't the first time that night actually that Martin had done that, given that he got put in a sin bin for a very dangerous attempt to shoulder charge, to charge down. That was the word I was looking for. A clearing kick from Dejan. But yeah, like we said, 60s, the bunker is fundamentally broken. And credit to Barrett and Gufferson. They were probably as critical as I've seen an Eels pair in a post-match presser be. I think the term lottery was used when it comes to the bunker. And they're not too wrong. I cannot disagree, because the bunker giveth and taketh from multiple occasions last night. And the Reagan Campbell Gillard quote unquote drop, where there were hands all over that ball, where the ball came out backwards. There were so many things fundamentally wrong with that decision, where the referee ruled it was a tackle while he was still being driven backwards. So the ball coming out backwards meant that it was a lost ball rather than a drop backwards. There were hands on the ball when it came out. You go to this obstruction. There is no way that is play on. And you had some questions about some onside in terms of another try, which I haven't had a chance to review, but I'd be very interested to see the tape. It is such an absolute crapshoot when the whistle is blown and the call goes up to the bunker. And the Eels, well, they, like you said, when you're one of the weaker teams in the competition in any given year, it feels like the calls are slanted pretty heavily against you.
John, you just used the word lottery. I want to rephrase it. If you're a team sitting down near the bottom of the table, it's not a lottery. It's like you've put in a standard Powerball entry in a week where it's jackpotted to 100 million, and you're expecting a friggin' call to go your way. That's what the Eels were holding on to. Now, look, Panthers are going to point to a 9-3 penalty count. Man, you are lucky. You are lucky that it was only 9-3, because how many of those kickoffs, right? We're right on halfway. Like, literally the Panthers ran offside before every one of those kickoffs that they made. I'm not talking about the ones where they contested the ball. I'm talking about their standard kickoffs. We're talking about the entire Panthers left side chase when there were the kickoffs deep to the left corner. They were offside every time. Every time. The referee wasn't positioned to look at it. I don't know, because if the referee was positioned to look at it, they'd see it every time, right? And as for that bunker call with the ball being punched out, oh my God. I don't know. And in fact, when it went up on the screen, I thought the call was going our way because it was looked at once, and I thought, well, it's that obvious. The call's going our way. And then there was a chat to the captains. And I'm thinking, well, the ball comes back to Parramatta. No. And then I unfortunately, with the way the replay was set up, I can't recall. I haven't actually watched the replay. I watched a quick recap of the end around the press conference on Friday Night Football on Fox this morning with the that kick chase from McLean. So I don't know whether on the broadcast they actually did a still frame of McLean's chase. But I'll tell you what, on first look last night live, and then the quick replay, it looked like he was, if he somehow managed to stay behind the kicker on the angles that I saw, I would be stunned. But I don't want it to be that it's all about the calls cost the Eels, even though I was super annoyed with some of the six again calls that were happening during the game, because the Panthers got their roll on their strike backs off some six agains where I was like, what? As it was happening.
There was one six again call in particular where it wasn't ruled from offside. It was a ruck infringement, and it was literally as the tackle went to the ground. It was like that is impossible to be a ruck infringement.
Yeah, and they were late. They were late tackle count calls as well. And look, we got one as well. I think it was later in the first half. But there was, I'm not going to totally go away from where the Eels need to look at in the mirror, because with 7.5 minutes to go, whatever it was, and we had the penalty down at their end, and for whatever reason, I'm infuriated by it. We went for an early tackle count kick into the in goal. Now, as it turned out, the execution wasn't too bad in terms of the kick, but how how did the chase? I haven't watched the replay. How did we not pin them down?
Yeah, that was
in goal.
Where Tungor and Talangi made contact. That should have been a bread and butter line dropout. And not to say that Penrith couldn't have got the ball back from the line dropout.
Yeah.
They would have gone short, no doubt. But
Yeah.
if you're going to kick early in that situation, and that is already questionable game theory, but to Dejan's credit, he did execute very well. That's a moment you got to ice. And, you know, it's the two most inexperienced players in our lineup, you know, between Tungor coming up from Cup and Talangi, and his role was just a straight-up young kid in this game. But in saying that, you know, they're the situations that coming through the grades, even, you know, in reserve grade, in Flegg and SG Ball, they're the moments where you just got to get it done, and they didn't. And that,
well, mate, unfortunately, all that attack that was launched down the left side it ended up being effective because you've got, and you can't say that Dejan is a particularly experienced player either.
No, because remember we had a podcast earlier this year where we were talking about how many was it? 8, 9 players that were 35 games or under, and Dejan was one of those 35 gamers at that point. Obviously, he's played a few more since. And we often hear, you know, 50 games and 100 games being cited as important benchmarks when it comes to figuring out first grade. So he's still well short of those metrics.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the missed tackles on that left side of the field ultimately became costly.
The Panthers carved it up. Like there's no.
I just want to go back, just as a final comment on that missed obstruction call. Here's another reason why that was so critical. In the chase on the break, Tungor was brought to the ground.
What an effort from Brendan Hands, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we talked about Brendan.
Yeah.
Pre-game as well about these effort on effort plays.
Yeah, he had a great game,
and that has to really get a mention. But it wasn't. So he ended up being taken off his feet, and Talangi had a chance to get him to the ground before he scored. He couldn't quite execute the tackle. He was dragged over the line with that. However, Talangi was someone who'd had to turn and chase in being beaten. The possibility for Dejan Arce to turn and chase, right? So even if you're not talking about, well, he wouldn't have been able to stop that break.
Dane Laurie went right through the channel where Dejan was defending. So let's just pretend that he didn't run through that channel.
That's right.
Still deny the chance to be where Blaze was and create a defensive wedge so Tungor doesn't free the arm up and get the ball down over the line. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, he like all of that was completely taken away. Oh, but I'm sure that it's the decision either won't be mentioned at all by Annesley on Monday, or it will be defended, right? As because
he ran inside shoulder, defensive decision making. Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Sorry, bullshit.
Yes, the bullshit klaxons are firing right now, 100%.
Effing bullshit. Like, man, like I said, I'm furious today. I'm angry, and look, it's probably in our interest right now to start giving a bit of praise to the team, because, man, they deserved it. Because we have to put this into perspective. I know the Panthers were missing some key players in Dylan Edwards. And,
I got to chuck over that because obviously we were at the game live watching this one, so that's why some of our reactions are a little bit raw, I imagine, because we saw some of that offside stuff and other things playing out. But chatting to some people simultaneously online that were talking about the commentary going on about, I can barely get this out, but you know, the poor understrength Penrith Panthers. It's like
look, yeah. So because Edwards and James Fisher Harris were absent, right? And then you look at, and maybe commentary is just completely oblivious to what the Eels have gone through this year. Let me spell it out for people. Besides missing the only player basically out there who is able to challenge Nathan Cleary in some capacity in terms of a highly valued halfback. And we just saw what Mitch Moses did in Origin football. So besides having him out, besides having a fellow who started the season in Ron Massey Cup on the wing, and a young player who is in his first season of football and is already departing the club, absent. The Eels have got a list of, about 9 players that aren't able to be selected in first grade this year. And we're talking about blokes that are out for the season. Our only other Origin player in Jermaine Hopgood, out for the season.
Like you said, Charlie Guymer, a young guy that was in the team because of opportunity for injury. But if you're talking about star/core players, Jermaine Hopgood, you mentioned Mitchell Moses, Junior Barlow, Bailey Simonson, Mike Acevo, Kelma Tuolangi, Luca Moretti, who in recent weeks had carved out a really good place on the bench once again. The Eels, they're missing half their team, or close enough.
Well, and the other thing, because look, I was going to write about this, and I probably will still write about it, because there are people who don't listen to the podcast. I mean, that's an absurdity in itself, isn't it, John? The people that don't listen to the podcast. But I added up the other day that through injury, the Eels have lost something like 131 games of football, and that's just on up to date, and also the ones that are predicted to be out for the rest of the season, right? So there's still games left. There still could be more that are lost to injury, but 131. Now that's pretty close to having 6 players absent for the entire year. 131 games of football. Now, they're already going into a season with 27 players, not 30, in their top 30. That basically means the Eels have played this season, on average, we've been able to select from 21 players in the top 30 for the season.
Yeah.
Now, we know everything that's been messed up about the season. We know everything that is a concern going forward, and that's not brushing any of it under the covers, because there is still a lot of work to turn this club around. But if you have a team that, at best, we're talking about at best, gets an average of 21 players to select from for the season, you are talking about already behind the 8 ball. But if you just also happen to mention that in that you've had the only 2 Origin players pretty much been unavailable for the majority of the season, as well as a host of others. We're not talking about blokes being out for 2 or 3 weeks here and there. We're talking about season-ending injuries. Man, I thought last year that the football gods just, put the big middle finger up to the Eels. As an Eels supporter, and you don't want to have a negative mindset, and you don't go into things with a negative mindset. We didn't. We were talking about the Eels can win this one this week. And that's probably the most upsetting thing, is they delivered. Right? They absolutely delivered. John, I just want to take this moment. I I can't really talk too much about it because I it's like it would be like giving away some secrets of training that uh, that we've watched unfold. I have to give a, a, a massive round of applause to what the coaching staff have managed to do with the mindset of the players. And there are things that have been happening at training, and it might seem quite simplistic, and I won't go into what's happening at training, but they've managed to do something that I'll talk about come season's end rather than right now, where the players are enjoying what they're doing, and we're seeing as a result of that that they're being competitive in these games, and I have to admit it's surprised me a little bit, but it's worked. And that's all you can say. Somehow, what is happening is working, and I just wanted to give a massive thumbs up. And as I said, I'll talk about it come season's end a little bit more. So, John, I've just been rambling.
I know, but I wanted you to just clear the air, vent, get it out, because that we went through the gamut of emotions that we went through last night earlier in this podcast, and it goes from, I wouldn't even call it cautious optimism. It was almost like reckless optimism, because the Eels were fantastic last week and they were solid against Melbourne, but you're coming against Penrith, and we know Parramatta aim up against Penrith, but it was always going to be tough. And then they jump out of the blocks. Blaze gets the first try. Penrith hit back. Eels go to halftime with a narrow lead, and you're like, wow, we're in this. And then the second half unfolds. We get out to a really healthy lead. Penrith come back. We then secure that 8-point lead again, and then the calls start happening. And as we said, again, you talk about it all the time, but there were moments in this game where the Eels, even with all the things outside of their control, still could have had this game in the bag. I don't want to blame Will Penasini. I thought he had a good game, but there was the drop ball off a tough catch that led to the try for Taruva, I believe, in the 75th minute. We catch that, and suddenly we have the ball. The line dropout that was missed in terms of Talangi and Tungo, another moment. There's always little things in this game. But there's also all the ref calls. And the ref calls kill you, because when you're taking on a team like Penrith, even at full strength, if both teams are full strength or close enough to, you got to play your damn best to get over the top of them. The Eels did that for most of this game, but couldn't quite get it done, and that's when those calls kill you. So very, very frustrating.
You know what? It's when the record books are looked at, and it's just like, here's a Panthers 2-point win against the Eels at away from home, and if you're not there, or if you didn't watch the game, you either don't get a full appreciation of what happened, or the focus is just on, the Panthers scored all these tries in like 6 minutes to win the game, and what's taken out of, the Panthers scored these 3 tries in 3 or 4 minutes to win the game. The entire context of the calls that went their way in that period of time is just taken out. The biggest call of the night. Let's be clear about this. The biggest call of the night was not even, I don't even know if it was looked at or how well it was looked at, but it's a 90-10. It's not a 50-50. It's a, well, it should really be 100%, but it's like a 90-10 call that somehow the 10 gets the decision.
Yeah.
The other thing too, in seeing like 50-50 calls. And again, we acknowledging there's nine penalties to 3, and somehow like the Panthers were having a bit of a moan in the press conference about, we just don't, those calls. Well, it's probably somewhere in the back pages of the rule book that we breached it. Like,
yeah, sure.
get it,
attacking a kicker's leg to the point where you could have broken it in half, like we saw with poor Lockie Ilias in reserve grade. Yeah, that's certainly a back pages rule breach.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's.
There was one more thing I did want to be a little bit critical of for our team, Sixties, and you talk about that sort of game theory, game management, and even taking out the fact that it was a degree of difficulty 8, 9, 9.5 out of 10 attempt to kick from 40 meters out to the wide left of the sticks. I feel like taking the 2 and Guffo's decision to take the 2 at that point in the game, and almost the idea of playing for Golden Point against Penrith, probably I can't agree with it, just because Penrith were clearly finishing that much more stronger over the top than us in the last 10 minutes, and taking that. I think we went for the shot at goal with under 3 minutes ago, and taking that game to Golden Point without Mitchell Moses, our ace field goal kicker, our ace clearing kicker, and a guy that can be a game breaker in terms of troubling that defensive line for a line break or a line break assist. I didn't really like it, and I know he missed the goal, and so functionally it became irrelevant. But yeah, it's a tough one because I respect staying in the hunt and being competitive, but I feel that going for the win rather than going for Golden Point was probably a better option in the context of the game there.
Can I ask a question of you then? Let's say we take the kick for the sideline, right, and we're attacking in the quarter, and then Penrith infringe right in front of the posts, say with 90 seconds to go.
I suppose if it's going to be right in front of the post with time ticking, not like out, you would have had time for another set. It becomes a much more complex decision because the kick is that much more gettable, and then you can talk about going to Golden Point with the and it's weird to say because I know it's only one set's time of difference, but it feels like you would have more momentum in that setting, given that Penrith would have dropped the ball defensively to concede that penalty. And I think I could swallow it there. But given where the kick was framed initially, poor Guffer was, setting himself up.
He was hundreds. Yeah,
he wasn't. It's mean to say setting yourself up for failure, but it was always going to be a difficult kick. And we've seen both he and Mitchell Moses struggle with kicks from that particular sort of quadrant or sector because, unlike rugby union kickers who pretty much if it's inside 50 or even on 50, they will practice it to kick from any angle. In league, you tend to practice, you'll practice from out wide, but it'll be within the 20, 25 metre vicinity of a conversion. You don't practice for those 35, 40, 45 metre attempts.
No, that's true. But can I also say, John, it's one of the things about those sort of longer distance is the kickers that, and this is going to be harsh to say, aren't in the team as goal kickers. Let me even try to. They're not pure artisans. They're not craftsmen as goal kickers, and that's going to sound harsh to talk about people who are, like Moses, a regular goal kicker, or Gutherson, the next up. Basically, if Mitch Moses isn't there, and Gutho's done his share of kicking over the years. But what ends up happening is they become so focused on making the distance that their technique falls away. And that's what has happened with Gutho this year with those 2 longer distance penalty kicks that he is absolutely shanked. And, the kicks were never like, there was never anything that about those kicks looked like they were going near the posts. It wasn't like, like they were just pulled to the right. I'm thinking if I'm the receiving team, that it's to my right. He's pulling them to the left. And that to me is symptomatic of someone that's focusing on getting the distance first and the accuracy second.
Yes.
And that's and that was, if you're going into it and you're concerned, like, I've got to get the distance, I've got to kick it dead if I don't kick it, because it's a penalty situation, it's not a conversion situation. You're at hundreds straight away, because I don't think your mindset is, I'm going to kick this goal. I don't think you're running through your usual preparation for the kick, all the things that would go through your mind as you're lining it up. It felt like that with Gutho, because it felt like he took an extra long time. I don't know. Look, I agree with you. Look, as soon as that penalty was awarded, I thought, damn, there's a choice.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the Devils' choices there, can't you? Because you got one on the shoulder saying, yeah, go for two, and the other one saying, go for the try. And it was always going to be difficult for Guffo in the dual role of captain and goal kicker last night to make a call. And he obviously chose to burden himself with all the responsibility. And that very much is a captain's decision, isn't it? To take it away, take it out of the hands of the team and the pressure on the team and say, I got you boys, I'm going to take it to extra time, or, even play for the win, because it would have been time to try and drive for a field goal. And we've seen Dejan kick a field goal this year, and we've seen Guffo kick field goals against Canberra, I believe it was, a couple of years back. So it's not like we were bereft of options, but it was always going to be a very difficult kick. Even for Nathan Cleary, it would have been a difficult kick.
But my first comment last night, as it was happening live, is I put my head in my hands when we were going for goal there, simply because, and I said, unfortunately, Gutho's not Cleary. And, what we 4 from 7 last night off the tee. I think they got it wrong on Fox. I think they said it was
6 conversion attempts, 2 penalty goal attempts, so 5 from 7.
Yeah, sorry, 5 from 7. No, or was it 5 from 8?
5 from 8. 5 from 8. I can't count. Yeah, 5 from 8, and then Penrith were 6 from 7.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Like, again, and I guess people might be listening to this and thinking, geez, for a bloke who didn't feel like talking after, and recording a podcast, I've got a lot to say.
That's why when you lance the wound, when you let all the pain and pus out, that's what happens. It's can be a little bit of stuff blocked up behind the initial coverage of the wound. So that's why these tend to be visceral and very emotional processes sometimes when you have a loss like this, or sometimes there's a big win like the one against the Warriors where you weren't expecting it, and on both times it's cathartic and there's an outpouring of emotion. And like I said at the start, it's the hope that gets you, isn't it? Because
look, it is, John, but it's also not something out of the blue that in this run that the Panthers have had of being like a generational team, a team that people are going to talk about in history, in rugby league history, about just how near unbeatable they were during this reign, that the Eels challenged them in basically every single game. Probably the only game that we didn't challenge them was in that grand final.
Yeah, and I was going to say, obviously the grand final is a bit of an asterisk there, but you got to think Penrith are pretty happy that we're not in finals contention again, because they must hate coming up against us, because it is always like they have to go to war. It's the way we play them. It is a great rivalry between the two clubs. They play great football. The Eels play great football, but it must zap the batteries too. Like the contests are so fast and physical.
But John, when you talk about them going to war, they're going to war where, to me, they've got a weapon that we don't have, which is getting crucial calls going their way, right? Because we've seen it in matches where somehow there are the most blatant things ignored. And I go back as well, and I'm sorry for keeping on repeating things and sounding like I'm whinging. Yeah, because I am. I'm whinging about this. That finals game when Luai took out Moses, when he's chasing and running through in support, the sort of thing where during that season, in the season after, if you accidentally brushed against someone who was chasing through in support, or just put your hand on them slightly and inconvenience their stride, you could be sent to the sin bin. He was allowed to wreath Moses off his feet in chasing through in support. And it was just missed by all the on-field officials and then the bunker. It was like when you get things like that happen, and when you get things like last night happen, you just got to call it out for what it is. It is complete and utter bullshit. There is no other way to describe it. But again, I want to pull myself up here, right? Because we can still say, got to look in the mirror at what we didn't do last night, which was that crucial point of that early kick and kick chase, where we basically didn't touch the ball again for about the next 5 minutes.
Yep.
And it just was like, when that's happening so late in the game, when the Panthers are able to just launch at what was the weak spot in the Eels defensive line, and Cleary is Cleary, right? I mean, you're talking about a bloke who literally hoisted his team onto his shoulders last year to win a grand final from an seemingly equally impossible situation, and he's done it, and we painfully had to watch him do it again last night. He's a freak of a player. He's one of the best that I've ever seen, and I have to acknowledge him, because the Eels cannot invite him to suddenly have all the possession and all the momentum late in a game, because he's going to deliver in much the same way as he delivered last night. And, when he was banging goals over from the sideline, and I'm just going, damn you, Nathan Cleary. Damn you for being so good. Right. So, John, the effort that went in there from this Eels team last night, the only team out there that was truly depleted. And that's acknowledging that, the Panthers had a couple of key players out who they would have missed, but you can't put it in the same stratosphere, the same universe as what the Eels were missing in terms of players. Like, come on. If you're daring to suggest that an injury depleted Panthers overcame the Eels, give it away. Don't even dare to comment on rugby league in the future. Like, don't dare to comment on rugby league in the future if that's how you're calling the game. So, look, a lot of praise to the Eels players. Effort on effort stuff, as evidenced again last night by Brendan Hands. He deserved to have that try stopped from what he did.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it couldn't be executed by the bloke who was chasing back in Blaze. He got carried over the line. But the opportunity to maybe have someone else there to stop that play in Dejan was stripped away by match officials who could not see the blatantly obvious last night. And I don't care what they come out and say. There is nothing they can say that's going to have me happy about that, because they can come out with all the reasons why everything was fine. Or they could even come out and say we got it wrong. They could come out and say we got it wrong. Well, how does that fix what happened? Because the very week that we're calling out the absurdity and obstructions, the game is taken away from Parramatta in that very moment. And who knows, look, we might have got a penalty there and then not been able to do anything, and Panthers might have still pulled it out of the fire. Who knows? But we won't ever know because of the way that the call went. John, maybe we should wrap this up and do our 3-2-1s.
Yep. Let's.
Right, yep.
Let's. I don't know if you talk about putting a bow on it because it's still going to linger into that Monday debrief by Annesley, where we might get a token apology or some bizarre defence of the officials. But let's get into our 3-2-1 because Eels showed plenty of ticker here, and usual suspects. Some other guys stepping up this one. I look at the stats: 60s, Guffo, Russell, Reagan Campbell-Gillard, Ryan Madison, Joe Fingahi, they all stand out on the sheet in terms of guys that stand out for just stuff I saw on the field. Brendan Hands obviously making that huge effort on Tungall, and they've got him down for he did lead the tackle count with 39. They got him down for 6 missed tackles, and I can't really remember too many bad tackle attempts from him. So it might have been a case of not locking up guys when the Penrith like to pinball through the middle. I don't know, but I thought Brendan was very good. And then, after that, Wiremu Greg tried to set a tone defensively. There was at least one big hit there. I thought, Dejan controlled the game really well. Another really just solid halfback game from him where he just focused on good clearing kicks. He mixed it up a little bit, a couple of short side plays or running the ball in the last plays. So, there's an interesting array of guys to pick for the points here. So I'm interested to see how you want to lead off on this one.
You're going to throw it to me?
Yeah, just tee up there to lead it off.
Okay, look, I like a lot of the players that you mentioned. The interesting thing about Joe Offengowie is that when he's coming, if he doesn't start the game, when he comes onto the field, it's almost like you feel he's going to steady the ship.
Yes.
So he's got a feature in there. And likewise, man, I'll tell you who I'm going to give the 3 points to, and this might sound unusual, but I'm going to give it to Ryan Madison. I thought that it was a performance from him where he made a lot of tough carries.
That's what I've been saying, man. I've been a Madison truther for the last few weeks where he's been copying a bit of criticism. If you watch the work he's having to do because of our weakened middle and just the way we're playing games, he's had to do some real dirty work in the middle. And against the best team in the competition, he did not shirk the workload, and there were some really strong carries. I think he ended up penalty at one point where it was just an impressive carry in the context of a set to get us out of our own quarter, and then I think he ended up getting a penalty as well. So, Maddo was a very sound 3-point option this week, I believe.
Yeah, so he's my 3. What about your 3?
He could be worthy for me as well, but I'm just trying to see who else I want to go to. It's tough. There was a really good team effort, wasn't it? So, I mean, the King was really good too. I could be really mean and dock him for the call to take the shot at goal, but I do think that was reflective of his position as captain, where he wanted to take the pressure away from his team. So I'm not going to dock him for that. And he just continues to turn up week in, week out with a body that should be on ice. He should be getting rested. If it was almost any other mortal being, I think they probably aren't playing the way Guffo does. So he is the heart and soul of his team. And 174 meters, couple of line break assists, a try assist. He was everywhere. I'll give him my 3 points. He deserves it.
Yeah. I'm staying with the forwards, mate, for my 2, and I'm actually going to go with Reg for my 2 points. I just thought that in the contest in the middle, I thought our forwards did an outstanding job against the Panthers forwards. And I have to, look, it'd be easy for me to go straight out to Gutho for the 2 here. And he'd deserve every bit of that. But I just have to acknowledge what was done through the middle. And, I'm giving it to Reg for my 2.
And I'll go for your 3-point pick in Maddo, who, like I said, I've been a Maddo truther for the last month or so. And I thought he was, again, really good against Penrith. Just taking up, not to say that other guys aren't doing the tough carries as well. You mentioned Reg, who you gave a shout out to Joe as well. There are guys out there doing really good work for the middle, but Maddo was playing big minutes. Where was his recorded minutes here? Down for 73 against Penrith. And I think he played last week against the Titans. I think it was in the vicinity of 60 plus. Titans, Warriors, what I'm saying, Titans. 60 plus minutes. So he's being tasked with a really difficult role. He's playing huge minutes, big work rate, asked for impact as well, and I think he's producing. There was some nice ball playing down the right side too in this game as well to set up some. They weren't like big line breaks or anything like that, but it was just really nice interplay between forwards to keep the left edge of the Penrith defense on its back foot. So I really liked what Matter did out there today, or today from last night.
Yeah, and let's wrap it up. I'm going to go 1 point to Gutho. He's Gutho. He did Gutho things. So it's such a good qualifier, isn't it? Gutho doing Gutho things, just pushing his body so far past the red line. Absolute beast. Look, we mentioned Ofungahi, we mentioned Reg, and they really do deserve points. I'm not going to give it to them, just so I can branch out and give a shout out to someone else. But along that veins, Brendan Hands, again, another shout out for him. I think outside of one errant pass to Dejan Arce in the second half, I thought he crafted a really good game from dummy half, and the effort to bring down Tungor was spectacular. Who else do I want to give a quick shout out to? We got Dejan again. Yep.
The guys in the back line I thought all tried their backsides off. The numbers aren't necessarily great for Tungor and Penasini, but I thought they did try their backsides off. And the other guy in the back line who I am going to give points to, because I just thought that the numbers aren't spectacular. It's 11 carries, 105 meters. But the timeliness of the plays he made under the high ball and engineering both a try and a try assist, I think were really impressive. And that's Sean Russell, who he's rotated between wing and centre, first grade and reserve grade. And I thought that was just such a, in this little run the Eels have been going on, starting back to the Melbourne Storm and then obviously the Warriors and now Penrith, I think he's just been so solid that it warrants a point. And I thought last night he scored a nice try, set Gufferson up for a try as well. A bit of craftiness where you've seen him botch that play for the right sideline in similar circumstances where he's not going to make it because the space isn't there. But he planted that right foot, came back in, rolled through contact and offloaded the Guffer, and I thought that was really good. So Shawnee Russell, the Rousey or Rhino himself, getting my 1 point this week.
John, I can't argue with that. In fact, I actually thought that it may well have been the best game that we've ever seen from Sean Russell. And as you say, when you see it 105 metres and you think, well, that's hardly spectacular, but it was the nature of his carries into contact as well. They were so brave. What we actually saw from Sean Russell tonight was what I had tipped in the pre-season and had been disappointed not to see during the season proper, because Sean bulked up. He had a really good pre-season. I mean a really good pre-season. And I just thought this is going to be his breakout year. And if he had been playing like that from the start of the season, I would have been patting myself on the back for the prediction. I would have been thinking, man, I'm a genius, right? And instead, I was going through the season thinking, what do I know, right? And then we saw last night, as I said, what I think was the best game I've seen from Sean Russell. Best game in a way that wasn't spectacular, right? It wasn't a matter of flash about it. It was a matter of absolute toughness and some smarts, and
it's a microcosm of what we constantly bang on about, isn't it? About doing the fundamentals right, making the smart calls, and how far it can carry you in a game. And it's obviously juxtaposed by the fact that at the end of the game, on the opposite side of the field, the Eels got those little things wrong. And so, again, sports is so weird and cool in that sort of way where, at our detriment this week, you see all these incredible interweaving but contrasting storylines and feelings and emotions. And just a state of being that you don't get from pretty much anything else, which is why we love sport. So yeah, we were at the butt of the joke this week, but it was a phenomenal game. Some fantastic individual efforts, a great team effort, even in spite of that mini collapse at the end, because that was also spurred on by some dubious calls that were outside of Parramatta's purview. And I can't help but be proud of the boys. They in a period of time, a passage of time in this season where they could have easily just turned their tails up, rolled belly over, and started getting rolled by teams like Melbourne and the Warriors and Penrith. They've found a way to be ultra competitive in 3 weeks and could have easily been 2 from 3 in this little stretch. So I am keen to see what they can do with the run home, because there are suddenly games that look very winnable with the effort that they're putting out there and the application that they're now applying themselves with to in regards to their approach to the red zone and their approach to the completion of sets and the way they're going to play, for the most part, field position and territory. So really love the turnaround. Like you said, the coaching staff deserves so much credit in terms of keeping these boys locked in for what could have easily been a lockout, because there's guys that have been, either they've been told or they're finding out in the media that they're getting moved on or potentially moved on. There's guys that are playing for their future. There are guys that are probably lucky to be in first grade. No, that's such a bad way of putting it, but they're so deep on the depth charts that they wouldn't be in first grade in a lot of seasons. So, and they're all putting in. So well done to I can't remember who's still there. It's obviously T-Baz, Murph. I don't know if Antonelli's still there, but
yeah, Steve Antonelli's still there.
You've got obviously Salts, the high performance manager there. Everyone that's there, Elkin, all the support staff. It is a collective effort, and the fact that they've righted a ship that was definitely not right is a huge effort.
Yeah. Salts is the football manager there. Trent Elkin, he's like the head of high performance there. So doing all the conditioning work and the programs around that. Look, it's just everyone's pulling together, and shout out to all those blokes, because they got jobs for next year. And I'm not going to go into which clubs that they've gone to, but when it comes out, you'll be highly interested in where some of those blokes are off to. But look, I just want to wrap things up by saying, during this season, I've had a lot of messages from people who say, well, obviously the players don't give a damn. They don't care about the fans, and it's disgraceful and all this sort of stuff this season. You don't get performances like you've been getting and recently, and or you certainly you got last night, without these players caring about what happens out there on the field. Because there's, can you talk about a motivation of avoiding the spoon? Like when the season's over, and the season's been over for such a long time, and they've been kicked from pillar to post. They're kicked. The club is kicked every week in the media, and it's not saying that there's things that are happening that don't deserve to be kicked. All right, there's a lot that the club's got to fix up, and they know my feelings on this. The club, don't worry about that. But what we witnessed last night was people who care, and look, everyone cares. Like, let me be very, very clear about that. Everyone in the club cares about what's happening. All the people that are, even the ones that are copping the biggest criticism, they care about what's happening. It's, and I don't want to go into it now, but it's just a matter of, if you're getting things wrong, you have to recognize that you're getting things wrong and accept that that you've got things wrong, right? And set about making change for, what your mistakes were, right? And that's all I want to say, just on that. Let's just finish this up with the positive that this team did us proud last night. They didn't get the 2 points. They should have got the 2 points. They can look in the mirror, but there's match officials that absolutely must look in the mirror. They're playing a team which is a generational team. And if you haven't acknowledged that Nathan Cleary is one of the best that's ever laced on a boot, then you don't know football. So all in all, it was heartbreak for us as supporters. But boys, any of the team that might hear this, or family members, because we know there's lots of family of people in the team that listen to our podcasts and read the Cumberland Throw, and we really appreciate that. Please pass on how proud we are of the boys last night, because they deserve to be proud. Keep your heads up, keep fighting till the end of the season, and you're going to get the crowds turning up like they did last night. Nearly 19,000 when there was rain about last night is just, and our team sitting down the bottom. And I know there's a lot of Panthers supporters that were there, but I'll tell you what, there's more Eels supporters than Panthers supporters there. So, it's a game that we can be proud of.
And
John,
I was going to say, before you get the sign off with your famous line, just a couple of quick points of order. New South Wales Cup did play before in the curtain raiser. It was a 22-all draw. Pretty exciting finish there. Penrith came back, but two players I want to shout out. Ethan Martin, returning from a hammy, scored a double either side of half-time, so great effort there. And then Brock Parker. We feel like we've been shouting out Brock a lot this year. Big game from the big man there. 22 carries, 180 metres, and 42 tackles with just a couple missed there. So huge effort from Brock at the lock of the scrum, and not the result they wanted in terms of the win, but a gutsy effort where I think goal kicking probably just stopped them from getting the W.
I've said I would, and I've said it to a lot of people around the club, coach and staff, other staff. I would really like to see Brock Parker get a debut. It's obvious it's not going to happen, but he deserves for it to happen, and that's all I'll say on that matter. Boys, should also mention only 15 players got used last night, didn't they?
Yes, correct, because Joey Lussick
we didn't see Lussick
didn't replace hands, and we didn't see. Oh, Dury did get on at the end, very briefly. So yeah, it was the 15-point, like maybe one players used last night.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you to everyone for listening tonight. Today. Thank you for everyone that was there last night at the club at Parra Leagues, the home of the Eels, and Michael Butner, and you'll be listening to that in just a moment. Please do continue on with the listening. I know it's been a long reaction podcast, and it's even longer listening to the pre-game appearance of Michael Butner with us. But in all honesty, you are going to feel that much more knowledgeable from what Michael Butner is able to share with you about the game and approaches to the game and that sort of thing. Thank you to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for their continued support of the Eels. Again, if you're whatever platform you're listening to this, if you can do the subscribe, the like, that helps, especially if you're on YouTube. John, thank you. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.
And now stick around for our chat with Michael Butner from last night in the pre-game show from the Bistro.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club. We're here for our pre-match chat about what's going to happen in the big game tonight. We are the Cumberland Throw. My name's Craig, this is John, and we are very, very privileged to have an Eels legend here with us tonight. He is player number 503. He played 263 NRL games, 129 with Parramatta. He represented City, New South Wales and Australia. 96 tries, 77 goals, 270 points. Everyone, please welcome Michael Butner.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for the warm response.
Michael, in recent weeks, the Eels have had a bit of a tough time losing players. We're not going to gloss over that. There's been a lot of young players that have made the decision to move on. We're talking about juniors, people who would have been Parramatta aspirational players. You were a Parramatta junior. after playing 4 years with the club, you made the decision to move on from the Eels. In your experience, what did it take to get you as an Eels junior to move away from the Eels?
I obviously went to the North Sydney Bears, and if you recall back in the 90s, the Bears had a very, very good side, and I must say I went there not thinking I was going to be in the starting lineup at the Bears. I felt that I had to earn my position, despite the fact that I'd played 4 years of first grade. But the big decision for me was, and that was at a time when Parramatta were there or thereabouts in terms of signing Brian Smith. They were also there or thereabouts in terms of signing the big four from Canterbury.
Yes.
Which sort of changed the whole dynamic at the club, which was a real positive for it. I just felt that I needed a change. I needed different coaching. I needed different players around me to see whether it would bring the best out in me. And there were 4 tough years here at Parramatta. There's no denying that, but they were 4 good years because I think it sort of laid the foundation for me to then excel into the player I was. Did I want to leave the Parramatta club? No. This is where I was born and bred, loved the club, but just felt that I was probably a little bit stale and needed to freshen up. And as it turned out, when I look back at my career, that change was a real positive for me. And while it might have seen me turning my back on the local club, hindsight has proven to be that it was a real positive for me. And to be honest, I think the 4 years that I had at North Sydney were probably the best 4 years of my career, as in consecutive years.
And I guess when we look at it, there wasn't any bridges burnt for you to come back to the club a few years later.
No, definitely not. It was all in good faith, and I was very transparent about the process in terms of what I was doing and why I was doing it. And there was never any bad feelings in relation to the club. And like I said, it was more about my career as opposed to, a financial decision or anything like that. It was certainly nothing like that. It was just about, I felt that I needed to be around quality players. And when I look at the calibre of player that were at North Sydney, we're talking the likes of a Jason Taylor, Billy Moore, Greg Florimo, Gary Larson, David Fairley, Josh Stewart, who I played Australian schoolboys with, Danny Williams, I also played Australian schoolboys with. So there was a lot of quality players there, and they'd had a lot of success at the Bears, and they came looking for me, which was a real positive for me. And like I said, I didn't know where I was going to fit into that team, or if I would fit into that team. But I realised as soon as I got there, just the different level of training, the different level of skill and calibre of player that I was playing with sort of made me realise that I actually had that ability, but I won't say it was suppressed here, it may have been, probably wasn't fulfilled here as much as it should have, and I felt that I did that second time round when I came back.
A quote that's been attributable to you is that thoughts become things, and that feels like the idea of conceptualization. So can you expand on that and explain that to us as a mindset and as an idea for us?
Look, I guess the main theory behind that is, and I've got it tattooed on my arm, to be honest with you, it's one of those things that it's a really simple concept, and the idea being is that any of your thoughts will become things. So I look at it this way: if I'm going to have a thought of some sort, it may as well be a positive one. And that's my outlook on life. It's my outlook on what I do in my workplace, on my time with my kids, time with my family, etc. So because you could spend all your time thinking about things that you've got no control over, you could be thinking negative thoughts, and there's every chance that, it definitely has an impact on you in terms of your mindset and where you're at. So for me, it's all about being positive, and I just apply that to my everyday life. So it's worked for me, and it continues to work. So I'm sticking with it.
It's obviously a very strong form of self-empowerment. When did you start embracing it?
Oh, look, I probably got to the point, I reckon it was about 2000, 2001 when I got back here to Parramatta. I was doing some alternative training programs, etc. And I just felt that I needed to be conscious about, the way I was thinking and what it meant for my game and how it had a positive impact. Therefore, I just applied it to, once I finished playing, that I could still apply those principles, and it's still effective today. So, again, that's not to say that things won't go wrong in life, but I look at it and I go, okay, well, I can deal with it one or two ways. And generally, if I look at it in a positive way or it's happened for a reason, then you can move forward and not focus on how bad that is. And look, I guess the other thing is, and I've done a bit of a service with the homeless people, did that for about 4.5 years, and what it made me realise is that we could think that life is really bad for us, but when you see others and put it into perspective, how tough some people really are doing it. So, it's a reality check, and I think that's okay for us all to have that at some stage in our life, to really focus in on how fortunate we are.
Michael, we're probably seeing two teams that are at maybe the polar opposites on that spectrum of self-belief and positive thoughts. You got the Panthers, and I noticed we got some Panthers supporters here tonight. You can give us a cheer. But of course, we got a lot of great Parramatta supporters here tonight. We got Rachel and Scott, Stuart Tan, the Magic Man. Good to see you here, Stuart. And we got Rebecca and Todd, some of our regulars here. So we got people, teams that are at the polar opposite in terms of, self-belief, that sort of thing. What you're talking about with thoughts become things, can that apply to an entire team?
Oh, look, I think it can, and I think that enthusiasm is contagious, and you see that with Penrith, right? You see it now with the Bulldogs. When they score a try, all these players come together. You'll see Luai jump on the back of somebody and celebrate, and they've been doing that for years now, right? It's contagious. They have this belief about themselves, and it just spreads. So from that perspective, not only do you back your ability, it actually works, right? So these guys now, and I remember last year, I remember the year before at the grand final, watching these players run out. They walk out with a confidence about them, right? That they go, okay, we're on a big stage here now, and they know how to deal with it. They know how to handle it. Whereas, Parramatta at the moment this year, it's a tough season, no doubt about it. And there's a lot of self-doubt. It just seems like everything that could go wrong actually does go wrong. And then it just exacerbates and continues to flow. And whilst you think you might be doing enough, you don't know whether the guy next to you is doing enough. And what your definition of enough is may not be enough compared to what the boys at Penrith are doing and what the guys at Canterbury are doing and what, the Melbourne Storm are doing. So, again, it's very hard when you're in that rut. And, I mentioned to you off the air about flogging a dead horse. At the moment, they seem like they're a bit of a dead horse at the moment, Parramatta. And they can get up every now and then, which is real positive. We saw that last week. They're certainly going to have to get up tonight because it's a local derby. And that means that, they're going to grow an extra leg. Will it be enough to get over this, Penrith side who, when we think about where we're at on the competition table, they're 4 points behind the Melbourne Storm. They win tonight, they go to 2 points behind, and the big clash is next Thursday night. So suddenly, you're in a predicament here where the minor premiership is on the line. So every game is vital. So, and again, they're very confident. They got Cleary back after a 10-week break. I know he's been back for a couple of weeks now, but he's come back ready to play. And you can see that. So that 10-week break hasn't been bad for him or the club.
You sort of touched on it just there, so I want to explore it a little bit more and continuing with that theme of contrasting team efforts and team performances. Between 92 and 95, you played on some Parra teams that struggled, but on the other side, in 01, you played on one of the best Parra teams assembled of all time. So I suppose it's kind of analogous to talking about Penrith now there as well. Should there be any differences in how you mentally prepare for matches when you're in that successful squad as opposed to when you're in a team that's struggling a little bit more? And are there differences in the reality of those preparations when, like you said, things are tough and you have to find a way to get up or not flog the dead horse.
There's big differences in your preparation. And whilst you know you're going in there to play an NRL game, right, that you shouldn't take for granted, there's also confidence, right? Not only self-confidence, but confidence in the players around you and your belief as to whether they can get the job done and whether they're capable of doing it against a strong side like Penrith. I also think there's, this ability to just rock up every week and you can do what you're paid to do. Look, I remember back in 2001, I probably trained more than I ever trained, right? But it didn't seem like it was a chore. I actually enjoyed it. I loved it, and I saw the results of it. And it's interesting, with a coach like Brian Smith, who, for me was the best coach I've ever had. I wish I had been under Brian Smith 5-10 years earlier. And that's not to be disrespectful to any of the coaches I had prior to that, but I just felt that I learnt so much about the game. And from that end, it meant that I could get the best out of who I was as a player. So, there's all these factors that come into it. And it's not just, if there was a magic button to press, there'd be 16 other teams pressing that right now. Okay? So it's not as simple as it sounds. And again, it comes down to the training environment, what's happening at training. It could come down to what's happening at home with your family life. All the players have lives. We just see them as robots that run out on the footy field, but they all have lives off the field. Yeah. So there could be stuff happening off the field that we don't know about, and that could flow on to different things within the team dynamic. So there's a whole range of factors that come into it, and it's probably what makes winning a premiership so special and unique, because it all just comes together and gels as one. And then to do it 3 times in a row, super special with a chance of doing it 4.
Yeah, it's really a case, I think, of the Panthers. Obviously, they'll go down in rugby league folklore for this era that they're going through at the moment, much as the Eels did in the early 80s, much as the Dragons did in that 11 premiership run. Michael, you've spoken a lot now about your philosophy, your mindset playing the game, but was there a role model for you as you were coming into your early experiences, either coming through pathways or in the early years of first grade, that you looked up to that maybe shaped some of your mindset ideas or how you prepared for the games?
Look, I think it's funny because I was 16 playing second division and I played SG ball for the first year. Had a good season, played Jersey Flegg the following year, the next year I'm playing first grade. So things from a rep perspective happened really quickly, and I probably never really had the mindset until that season of Jersey Flegg, the end of the season, that maybe I could go on and play, maybe not even first grade, but just grade football. Under 21s, reserve grade, and maybe if I got the chance, who knows, play first grade. When I got to Parramatta and started training, with the reserve grade squad and eventually the first grade squad, there was a guy called Brett Kenny who went okay, and I know he was at the back end of his career, but I thought if I'm going to be, and these were just little drills we were doing, fitness drills and, sprint drills and, attacking drills, I would watch him and he was my benchmark. And I don't know whether he was going fast or slow, right? But I thought I had to beat him, right? Because if I could beat him, then I can say I beat Brett Kenny, but it also meant that, geez, he was someone that I could aspire to be like. Yep. And so that was it for me when I first started at Parramatta. Obviously, I had a lot of good players that I played with whilst at the Eels in that first phase. But Brett Kenny was clearly the standout. And then by the time I got to North Sydney, then it was a whole different level. There were guys that were, just performing, training, like Jason Taylor, as small as he was and as targeted as he was by opposition teams, he played something like 193 first-grade games, consecutive first-grade games, without being rested or injured. So that in itself, that's like 8.5 years, 9.5 years of first-grade football, which is just phenomenal. And that's a credit to him in terms of the way he prepared, the way about he trained, his professionalism, and the way he went about his game in general. So, you know, for me, it was just a big eye-opener for me, and I knew that I had to lift my level and my understanding of what I had to do from a training perspective to then be able to take that out onto the playing field. Because there's one thing I do know, there's plenty of shortcuts on the training paddock.
Yep.
There's none out there. But
Yeah,
if you want to find them, you'll find them easy. Yeah. But you'll get found out very quickly.
Very, very sage advice. And you mentioned the Canterbury Four earlier in our discussion, and obviously their arrival coincided with your departure to North Sydney. So when you came back, Eels looked vastly different, big beneficiaries of the Super League war. There was also an influx of talented young players, and also Brian Smith, who you've credited as being your best ever coach there. So you come back to a vastly remodeled Parramatta in 2001 as part of that big team. What was the biggest change in the club? Was it purely the personnel and all the different turnover there, or was the addition of Brian Smith a bigger in your mind as far as turning the club around?
I felt it was Brian Smith and what he had to offer. I also felt that it was a prosperous time in terms of local juniors. The likes of Michael Vella, Nathan Kalis, Jamie Lyon. I know he was from Weewar, but he'd been in the system. The Hindbash brothers, David Vilecki was here, Luke Bird, of course. Again, not necessarily locals as such, as in Parramatta juniors, but had been in the system for a long time. And for me, that lays your foundation for any club. And I think, you look at, and you can do this over the last 25 years, probably over the last 30, 40 years, who knows? We can go all the way back to 81, 82, 83 if you want, but most teams that go on and win the premiership have players within their club, and generally it's probably about 8, 9 or 10 players within their club that have been or come through their junior system. They don't have to be local juniors, but they've been through their system. They understand, they take pride in the jersey, they take pride in everything they do, and they understand what it takes to be at that club, right? And so, and again, the Melbourne Storm, they don't have local juniors, but they have kids that come into their system at a young age. Roosters likewise, right? And you look back on it, and that's what Parramatta had at that point in time. They just had this group of young players who was coming through, and there was myself, who was 28, 29, Jason Taylor, who could provide that guidance and support. Brad Drew come into the club, right? Again, you look at your spine, right? There were probably 3 very critical positions that needed to be addressed, and it certainly helped in that season. And we still to this day the best attacking side to ever play the game.
And just on that, Michael, that was how change came about for the Eels back then. What about now? The Eels are bringing in a new coach in Jason Riles. We're not hearing too much in the way of changes to the playing roster, but is it something that can be turned around just with a change of who's guiding them and a few key players?
Look, I have no doubt, but it's not going to happen overnight, and that's the harsh realities of it. And I think, a classic example right now is Canterbury, right? We can go back to 2020, 2021, right, where they started to rotate their entire roster and slowly chipped away, right? They got Burton in, they got Kickow, right? They got Reid Marnie. Some really good buys there. The next year, they get a couple of extra people in. The following year, they get Crichton, okay? They're working on building that strong foundation and then chipping away at all the other little positions. And I look at clubs like Penrith, I look at clubs like Melbourne, I look at clubs like the Roosters. When you look at their roster, their turnover, they're probably making 2 or 3, maybe 4 critical decisions or roster decisions at the end of every season. It's pretty hard to stuff up 3 or 4 right? Whereas the Bulldogs, Parramatta to a lesser extent, and probably more so now, they're probably going to make 10 to 12 changes. And in doing so, you're every chance of making errors there, right? Which means the following year, you're doing the same thing, which means the following year, which makes it very hard. So you've actually got to be very smart about your recruiting and how you go about it, who you're targeting, why you're targeting them, and that will come down to Jason Riles and what he wants as a coach. We've also got the foundation of, a great halfback. You've got to get the right players around him, and what's going to suit him, and what's going to suit the rest of that playing group. So, there's a lot of work to be done. It's not just a case of filling in the gaps. You've actually got to do it strategically and work out what the best approach is for the club.
Now, Michael, I think I know what the answer to this question's going to be, and it's still back on this 2001 team. As a supporter, watching that season, the level of entertainment that we got as fans in the stand was off the scale, right? Absolutely off the scale. And I think it might have surpassed some of the entertainment that I had watching the teams of the early 80s in terms of, like what the tries were like, just the excitement in the games. So the question to you is, how much fun was it to play in that team?
Phenomenal. Like if there was that much fun for you as supporters, it was fun for us, I can assure you. Like it is just, I'm very grateful to have that opportunity to be a part of a team like that. And despite the fact we didn't win a competition, at various stages I'll look at the highlights package from that season and just sit there in awe and go, wow. Yeah. Like that is just one hell of a team, and the entertainment value that they brought to fans, the entertainment value they brought to opposition fans, because there must have been times there where opposition fans are going, how do we stop that?
Yeah.
Right? And there were times there that we just had that much confidence it made no difference. We could just felt like we could put it on, and it was confidence in the guy that you're playing with. It was confidence in the coaching to know that whatever game plan was put to us, that we could deliver on that and do it comfortably. And as you start to do that at the start of the season and you build momentum, it just gets stronger and stronger. And that's where, Penrith are right now. Right? They just have this belief in themselves that doesn't matter what's thrown at them, they can take anybody on. And they can score enough points, they can defend if they need to. They've just got it down packed, and it's, again, not an easy formula to come up with. But once you get it, and Ivan Cleary's done a great job, because you think about the calibre of player that have left Penrith now, that hasn't been easy to replace. But due to the system they have there at the club, they've been able to do that and fill it and maintain what they had 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So that's a credit to the club there and the way they've gone about it.
You're not the only one on this panel that enjoys the 01 highlights package. I think earlier this show you called that team the greatest ever attacking team, and it's not just the pure statistics there, it's the way in which you attacked that year. It was just spectacular try after spectacular try. Truly, the greatest attacking team that we've seen. And in that team, the stars obviously performed on a week-to-week basis, but the next man up and the other guys, the deeper guys in the squad, also played a huge part in getting that team all the way to the grand final. Who was in that team, in that 01 squad, that you feel was probably a little bit underrated or even criminally underrated when you look back on things these days?
Well, you know what? You can look at that team. Like, it was quite amazing when you think about the squad that was there, because you're right. And you forget who comes in and comes out. Yeah. Because it didn't matter. Yeah. Because you knew they were going to do the job. There wasn't a weakness there. It was just that someone was rested or someone was injured, and you knew that who was coming up was going to do their role and do it well. We see it with the clubs now. Melbourne Storm, classic example. Penrith Panthers, absolutely classic example. The fact that they've had their halfback out for 10 weeks tells me that, and they're still sitting second on the comp. It tells you a lot about their system, what they have in place, and that their players around them can stand up and deliver. look, to rattle off a couple of names, Alex Chan was one of them, big front rower, right? And again, you look at it, he did his job and did it. He was just a hard man who went forward, did his job. Dave Solomona, Dean Witters, again, two guys who had a lot of skill and ability, not necessarily started a lot of the time, but, when they come on, they had an impact. So, we had a lot of those guys, Daniel Irvine, who would come on, and, little Bubsy, who, he just had that toughness about him. He's probably very similar to a Reed Marnie, just tough and in your face and physical. And you're replacing a player like Brad Drew, who was so dynamic out of dummy half, but he did it so well. Again, there were so many names that we could rattle off because everybody just did their bit and just knew what to do.
Michael, we know that someone like Michael Vella could play because he was a representative footballer. But when it comes to the legends of the club at that time, he was legendary for being a pest. Is that a true legend?
Michael Vella is a great guy for any club in the sense that not only what he did on the field, but the environment and the laughs and the joy that he brought off the field in the dressing rooms. And some of it was revolting, but it was funny. That makes sense. Like it was, and back in the day you could get away with that stuff and it was all okay. He was such a good character and such a great club man to have both on and off the field. So, yes, he was a pest, but a good one.
Now, unfortunately, we have to address this, which is the job didn't get done on grand final day. And obviously, the likes of Andrew Johns and Ben Kennedy had a fair bit to say about that. But when you look back and reflect on it, after such a season, why didn't it happen on the big day?
You know what? It's a really good question because it wasn't as if we were lacking confidence. It's not as if I think we just got absolutely ambushed and maybe didn't know because we'd had such a good season. We hadn't, especially that last 20-odd weeks of the season. I remember the start of the year, we were win-loss, draw, win-loss. But for the last 20, I think we'd basically gone through undefeated. May have had a draw in there somewhere. So we really hadn't found ourselves in that situation in any game for like 6 months.
I think I recall the previous time playing Newcastle was something like a 40-0 result here at Parramatta Stadium.
Yeah, it was. You're right. I think it was round 22, round 23, towards the back end of the season. And again, please don't get me wrong. We didn't go in there overthinking or being overconfident. And I've got to say, it's funny because at half-time, I remember us being down 24-0. We still honestly believe that we could come back.
That's what I wanted to follow up naturally was you did storm back into that game. Honestly, how many more minutes do you think that team needed to take it to extra time?
Look, I reckon if we had another 5 minutes, and I think about the try to Tamanatau that he scored, that bounced and he ended up getting it on his knees and putting it down. Like if it bounces in any other direction, that's a whole different ball game. And, you could use the old saying, if my auntie had balls, you know what, she'd be my uncle. But that's not the case. But it was one of those things where, I think another 5 minutes. And I knew, I think it was about 30-12. And they went for a field goal. And there was probably 15 minutes to go, I'd say. And I said to the boys, they're worried. They missed the field goal, but the fact that they were 18 up and were still looking for a field goal, I could tell that there was a lot of tension there and a lot of pressure. So I just felt that, maybe another 5 minutes would have been enough, but you know what, we had 40 minutes in the first half to get that right, and we didn't get it done.
And while the 0-1 Eels entered that game as favourites, the 2023 Broncos, they had 9 figures on the premiership last year, and save for 20 minutes of the probably most impressive football you'll see from anyone in a grand final, they would have been the premiers. They've obviously been a shadow of themselves this year. Obviously, the Eels in 2022 to 2023 had a similar drop-off too, but what sort of toll does it take to lose a title that you were expected to win or you should have won in the case of the Broncos? Because they were there, they were over the finish line.
Yeah, they were, and you can probably tell now, I would say the difference between, there it is, bring it back, the difference between them having another big year this year and missing out, may well have come down to that 20 minutes for the Broncos because it is a real tough, it's tough mentally to get yourself up again because you know how hard you've worked. You know that, and in particular the Broncos, how close they were. Right? You're right, they had 9 fingers on the trophy. It was theirs. And somehow it just slipped away, and you may not get that opportunity again, and that's the hardest thing to accept. It's the hardest thing to understand. It's the hardest thing to follow up on. So from that end, I look at that and I go, you know what? These guys have got a lot of work to do, and they've got to turn it around, and we've seen how much of a struggle it is.
How do you reckon someone like, Nathan Hindmarsh or Nathan Kalis, who were there in 2001, Luke Burt, would have felt that when it came around in 2009, that opportunity came round again? They lost the game, but ultimately it was proven that the Melbourne Storm weren't doing as they should have been doing when it came to salary cap.
Yep.
I mean, how does a player deal with that when they look back on their career?
Again, it's it's very hard to accept and very hard to understand, knowing that the opportunities are limited. So to feel like you've been cheated somewhat, it would be really hard to accept. And but those guys, despite the fact they didn't win a premiership, they're still considered, and justifiably so, Parramatta legends, and will always go down that way. It's just a shame that some of the best players in the game don't always end up with premiership rings.
Yeah, how true. Now, we want to talk about this Eels team now and what's been happening recently, because without question, over these last few weeks, the Eels have been incredibly high on effort, if not maybe quite so high in execution, right? So, are you seeing something in the team that should buoy the hopes of supporters?
Oh, look, I think last week was clear evidence of that. I think Trent Barrett has done a really good job considering the circumstances. It hasn't been easy. And look, I just feel it now comes down to the individual player. And self-pride is a big thing and a big part of the game. And you just need to work out whether it's important enough for you or whether you put the cue in the rack. So I just hope with 4 or 5 weeks to go that these players do give that effort, because these supporters give their effort every week to rock up and see the players play. It's important they return the favour and don't disrespect the fans, don't disrespect the club, don't disrespect themselves, because ultimately it's their credibility, it's their pride, it's their pride that's on the line.
Yeah, we saw that their care factor was obviously very high last week, because there were times when they won moments that we've been missing out on winning in previous games, game-defining moments. And a couple of those were, actually Brendan Hands was instrumental in a couple of those. There was a loose pass in the quarter. That's been very in the attack, which had been costly for the Eels in a number of games this year, where opposition teams were swooping and basically going the length of the field. There was also another one where he forced a line dropout, where he stayed in that moment and knew exactly what he was going to do, where he tackled the bloke and then lifted him in the same motion to drive him back into the end goal. Those sort of effort-on-effort plays, is that the key to winning tonight?
Sometimes I think we make the game harder than what it is. And ultimately, effort is a big part of it. And sometimes your efforts aren't going to be rewarded. But if you keep persisting, and if everybody keeps working with that belief, then eventually it does turn. Right? There's no doubt that skill is an important part of the game, but these players have all got skill. Right? It's about, combining all that skill together and trying to get the best out of each other. But you won't do that if you've got two players that are a little bit down. right? That effort, those effort areas just need to be there, and they need to be there consistently, but you just can't turn it on out there. Those efforts need to be a training, right? So you can, like I said, put the cue in the rack if you choose to, or you can dig deep and really have a crack and see where it takes you. And hopefully that's where Parramatta is for the next 5 weeks, out of respect for these supporters.
I'm not sure you can call it serendipitous, but the Eels come into a game against the unquestionable benchmark of the NRL again, Penrith Panthers, back-to-back premiers. There were kind of similar circumstances to, it's not quite the corresponding match given it was round 26 last year, but end of season, Battle of the West against Panthers. There was no Mitchell Moses last year. We went out to Penrith. Again, no Mitchell Moses tonight. Eels undermanned. They had a blueprint on that day to upset Penrith. Was it 36-18, I think? Is it a case of a similar game plan tonight, or do you look for something different, that effort-on-effort stuff or hustle plays? Like, what do they have to do tonight to get the win?
Look, there's no doubt effort has to be there. That goes without question. You know what you're going to get from the Penrith side, right? You know that the back three are going to run for 200 metres plus each and every one of them, right? So whether you allow them to do that or not, that's entirely up to what you do defensively. It also comes down to your kick chase and what you're doing there, how effective your kicks are. And without Moses, that's going to be a little bit tougher. But field position and staying in the contest is probably two of the biggest aspects. And I think they showed it earlier this year when they played against Penrith, that the change of angle in the short ball was really significant and effective for them. And most teams will try and go wide because they're so tight defensively. It's actually when you go against the grain. They're sliding so hard that when you go against the grain, you actually create opportunities and chances. And for me, again, it's about running those right lines, running them with, some level of commitment, but also, executing properly. With most things, if you execute properly your plays, you will test the opposition, right? And if you do that continuously, eventually someone's going to make an error in the defensive line.
You mentioned that fearsome Penrith back three, and no Dylan Edwards tonight. He's recovering from a posterior cruciate. He'll be back in time for the finals, thankfully, for Penrith. But when you think of that back three in terms of the metres gained and being a meat grinder, it's probably Brian To'o. We've seen different teams that take different angles here. In your mind, on the fifth tackle, do you kick to To'o or do you kick away from him? Would you rather get the kick return or the tackle one, tackle two settler?
Look, again, I think it comes down to field position and where you're kicking from, right? Because if I'm kicking from 40 metres out in the attacking zone, I'm putting it up and I'm putting it to To'o, right? If I'm kicking from my side of the halfway and I'm looking for yardage, again, Dylan Edwards isn't here tonight, but you watch his kick return. As soon as he catches the ball, it's better than any other fullback in the game.
He's in top gear straight away.
Correct. He takes his first 5 steps, then he assesses what the defensive line is doing, and he works out where he's going to run. But those first 5 steps are done instantly. So, if I'm kicking long, I'm trying to find space, and I'm probably trying to get away from... Look, it doesn't matter, because if he's got space, he's going to make metres.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so probably I kick away from him and try and get our guys to get our defensive line right, get off the line and try and really put a lot of pressure on him. The biggest thing with To'o is, he's got his leg drive. You need to be solid in impact, right? That first impact needs to be right on, right? And if it isn't, then he's going to make those post-contact metres.
So, Michael, who wins tonight? What's your tip?
I've got to say the Eels. They have to win.
Good man.
I wouldn't put your house on it, but I've got to say the Eels.
Now, who else here thinks the Eels can get it done tonight? Have we got anyone with faith tonight? Can we get the job done?
There we go. There's a bit of support out there in the crowd.
I love it, mate. I love optimism too.
Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be the Parramatta Eels breaking the drought this year, and this might be the last time we have a chance to catch up for you, given that the season is starting to wind down in terms of the regulation portion of it. So I've got to ask you, who takes it out this year? Did Penrith go for the 4-peat, or someone like Melbourne step up to the plate and knock them over?
Well, you know what, it's funny, watching Melbourne last night, and that first half was really impressive, second half not so great. They've had Munster out for pretty much most of the season. Jerome Hughes is probably in outstanding form. they've got the best spine in the competition. And I've got to tell you, you look at, and it's only, Penrith is a close second, right? I'd sooner have Harry Grant than Kenny. And again, that's no disrespect to Kenny.
Just Harry Grant's the best dummy half.
Correct. Right. Again, I'm not being disrespectful there, but the two very good spines. The Roosters, for me, are a bit of a dark horse. They can score points. The only way I think the Roosters can win the comp is if they only play one of those two teams throughout the finals.
Don't draw both
right?
on the route to
and it has to be in the grand final. It has to be a one-off game where they meet one of those two teams. If that doesn't happen, then I don't think, and their record suggests that they're not going to get it done against Melbourne or Penrith. I'm looking forward to next week, as in when Penrith take on Melbourne. I think it'll be an absolute cracker of a game. They both play a similar style. They've got creative players. They're physical. They can defend, but they can also put on points. So, I reckon it's a toss of the coin at the moment for experience, right? And the fact that they've gone back to back to back, I'm probably leaning just towards Penrith. Cleary's had a good break, which always helps.
Yes, and as a neutral, you got to love when the JJ Gilton and the Munna Premiership has a head-to-head clash this late into the season. So,
100%.
like you're going to be watching that one with eagle eyes.
And finally, Michael, I'm interested in your take on the appointment of Jason Riles. Maybe what you know of Jason as from his football background, anything with his coaching. How do you rate the appointment?
Well, look, what I do know is he's been in some pretty good systems. That's a big plus. Cameron Serrata was in a very good system at Penrith. He's had success. So, look, I think it's a good appointment. He's obviously been the next in waiting in terms of doing his time as an assistant coach. So he's got that experience behind him. That's obviously a different ball game coaching a team as opposed to being an assistant coach. He's been with the Wallabies. So, look, he'll know that he hasn't got an easy job ahead of him. He's got plenty of work to do, and I love the fact that he's put his feet in behind the table straight off the bat. He got stood down by Melbourne and has come up and started putting things in place, which is a real positive and can only be a positive for the club. So from that perspective, I think he'll do a great job. I think fans need to be supportive. I think they need to give him time because it isn't going to be an easy road. But if we can see small improvements over the next couple of years, then we can start to build on that.
Well, Michael, it's been an absolute privilege talking to you here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up our pre-game. Please thank Michael Butner for being here tonight.
Thanks, folks. Really appreciate it. Go the Eels.
We are the Cumberland Throw, and go you mighty Eels.